Hey, good evening. Welcome to a special bonus episode of the HoosLeft Podcast, a show about Indiana politics, history, and culture from an unapologetically leftist perspective. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers, and I'm broadcasting from Bloomington. So last week, State Senator Chris Garten, a Republican out of Charlestown, announced his candidacy to replace Rod Bray as Senate President Pro Tem. Garten had resigned from the number 2 spot in June, citing differences with Bray's leadership, and then late last month, Bray announced he would not seek another term as majority leader in the upper chamber. Several Bray allies were ousted by MAGA challengers, supported by outside Trump-aligned super PAC money in the May primaries, setting up the far-right Garten to take over the caucus if, as expected, Republicans maintain their Senate majority in November. But Garten's own re-election is no sure thing. The MAGA extremist has courted controversy with his social media posts, spewed inflammatory rhetoric on the Senate floor, authored bills that bring harm to Hoosier families, and he faces a top-notch Democratic opponent in the fall. My guest this evening, Nick Marshall, grew up in foster care, defied the odds to graduate from the University of Louisville, and now works to advocate for children that face a similar uphill battle. He'll join me momentarily, but before we begin, this is independent progressive media, and we need your support. We don't paywall content. We don't charge candidates for interviews. We certainly don't have billionaire benefactors. We refuse to hide important information behind paywalls in the middle of a political crisis, even to our financial detriment. So please, if you find value in conversations like this, go to progressiveindiana.net and subscribe at the paid level. It's only $5 a month or $50 a year to help us build the infrastructure that will pop the right-wing media bubble in this state. And while a paid subscription is the best way to help us grow and sustain this project, you can help in other ways by liking and sharing on social media, commenting, leaving reviews, providing feedback, and forwarding our content to your people. Get us when you can. Mostly, we just want you here in this community of Hoosiers dedicated to making the state and its government work for all of us, not just the elite few. Please join us. Tell the others. Let's build a radically democratic Indiana together. Now, let us welcome our guest this evening. There's Nick Marshall. Nick, welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me tonight.
Hey, good to see you again. Before we really get into this thing, why don't you introduce yourself to the good folks who don't already know you?
Yeah. Once again, thank you again. My name is Nick Marshall. I'm running for Indiana State Senate for District 45, which is all of Clark and a portion of Floyd. I want to make sure that everyday Hoosiers get the health care they deserve, both our seniors and our children, through Medicaid. I want to make sure that we tackle the affordability crisis, from rising utility bills to daycare situations happening where individuals and families have to give up their jobs so they can watch their children. I want to make sure public safety is number one, because if fire, EMS, or the police and you have an emergency, you want them showing up your door. And also, as something like you said earlier in the introduction, education is near and dear to my heart. In the foster care system, education got me to where I am today. And I'm so thankful for those foster parents who put that education in front of me and told me this was a true goal and you can really make something possible out of yourself and be something great out there.
It's always good to see your story is inspiring, and I'm just, not exactly going to be a neutral observer here when I say I'm really pulling for you in November and just in general. So last time we talked, Nick, it was, listen, I had you on the Sunday show, I don't know, late April, early May. It was right before the primary. But before that, it was December. It was just a couple days after Christmas. And on Christmas Day, your opponent, Mr. Garten, got some national and international headlines, I believe, with his AI slop posts showing himself beating up Santa Claus on the steps of the Indiana State Capitol on Christmas morning. That guy, very serious individual, is now poised, with only you standing in his way, to become the next Senate President Pro Tem in our fine state.
Yeah, so we'll go back to Christmas. And of course, as we talked, I thought it was a joke. This was something serious. I showed my wife, And I was like, hey, it's Christmas. It's time for people to be with their family. And within an hour, I probably had over 10 to 20 messages, and it just kept trickling. And then actually I said, hands off, it's Christmas. People need to be with their families. And then I got a call the day after Christmas to take control of the situation. And we are supposed to be people of joy, happiness around this time of coming together during Christmas. And a lot of people spend their hard-earned money working that overtime, working that extra shift to put a gift underneath the tree. And now this happened. I mean, that happened. And as far as him going to be speaker, we saw this coming a long time down the road. Okay. Ever since the redistricting situation, he was beating his hand on the Senate floor saying everything is political when it should really be about the people. And when you want to disenfranchise and take people's vote away, as well as representation, having Andre Carson as Congressman Andre Carson and Frank Mervan as representation for Democrats, but also Andre Carson as a person of color, just like me, to have that representation taken away is something we need to truly start to talk about. Because as I said in the convention to the Indiana Democratic African American Caucus, I said, hey, they're not going to stop here. If we don't stop them now, they're going to go after these state Senate seats who have African Americans representation. They're going to go against these state representative seats too. They won't stop there. So if we want to see people that look like us, that our children can look up and inspire to be something about, we have to start stepping up. And this is the time right now to step up and stand out and say, hey, we want representation. We want to be on that floor fighting for you, the everyday Hoosier.
You know, I think Garten really took a page out of the Trump playbook that with that stunt and with many of his stunts, but the outrage bait, the trolling, it got people talking. Listen, here we are. It's, 8 months later, we're still talking about it. So I guess mission accomplished in that regard. But you could definitely see it coming. Just a couple weeks before that, you mentioned the redistricting. He was on the floor of the state Senate, banging his fist on the table, talking about everything is political. It invoked a lot of dog whistle language. You see the clip from the Indy Star and other places go around of his speech. The whole speech is worth a watch. If folks want to go back to the Indiana General Assembly website, you can find everything they've ever done. His entire floor speech is there, but it talks about protecting our heritage and saving our country from invasion and stuff, and really invoking a lot of, let's frankly, white nationalist dog whistles in his speech. Really concerning. I listened to it live at the time when he was giving it, and my ears went up. I'm like, oh, I recognize what he's doing there. But to your point, Nick, that redistricting was about disenfranchising voters of color, people who just enjoy democracy. Our state's already terribly gerrymandered. It's maybe a 55-45 state, 60-40 tops in terms of the way people vote at the top of the ticket in statewide elections. As it is at the congressional level, Democrats only have 2 out of 9 seats. I'm no mathematician, but I think that's only 22% representation. So about
repeating
what we probably should have. And then they wanted to divide Indianapolis cynically into 4 right down 38th Street, right through the middle of a predominantly black neighborhood. They were going to divide people of color in Indianapolis and take a couple and put them in these large, vast rural districts, stretching from, I think one of them stretched from the south side of Indianapolis all the way down to where you're at, down on the river there. Yes. Very cynical. And thankfully that did not go through. And because of that not going through, Mr. Bray, the Senate President Pro Tem, and many of his allies lost their jobs, essentially. Now, Bray is still in the Senate until 2028, but he's no longer going to be the leader. 6, I want to say, maybe 7, if everything going on in the Lafayette area this week stands, yes. Where it appears an election has been stolen out from one of the incumbent Republican state senators there. But, these so-called moderates, and again, that word's doing a lot of lifting there. These folks have been pretty extreme over the past 10, 20 years of government in Indianapolis, but, moderate by current Republican standards. They were ousted by far right MAGA, Trump-supported big money, Trump money, Jim Banks money. The guy from Gaylor Electric, I want to say, gave who is now the state commerce secretary, by the way, old Chuck Goodrich, gave like $300,000 toward that super PAC to oust all these moderate Republican senators. So the state Senate, if these people win in November, and I've talked to a lot of their Democratic opponents, some really good folks out there, still uphill battles with gerrymandering and whatnot, but the far right is poised, unless we really turn out here in a couple months, to entrench power in the state Senate.
Yeah. So I'm going to go. This is what I talked about people about what's going on with districting. It's never over. Okay. It's never over. We have to realize that. And so now you spoke about now there's 6. I tell people you have 5 good reasons to pay attention to this race. And now it's 6 because if that 6th person gets that vote, but 5 individuals who are Republicans who fought for you and didn't want redistricting were ousted. It should always be about for the people. It should never be about politics. We should put people first, and people are really hurting and struggling right now. And 3, those 3 votes now are possibly overturned at what you're talking about because of the recount the situation, because that other Republican was up by 3 votes. And I think now the one that was backed by Trump is now ahead if that recount still goes forward. Now,
yeah,
2,
just for people's reference, we're referring to Spencer Deery, the incumbent Republican senator from the Lafayette area. 1, we thought his election by 3 votes. They've been in the court battles back and forth between him and his opponent, Paula Copenhaver, over a recount. Well, this week, miraculously, the state commission found enough quote unquote questionable ballots to toss out. So she is now poised to win.
Yes.
There will still be more court proceedings, I am sure, but go on.
Yes. And so now that individual is going to be possibly overturned if that goes taken care of. And I'm pretty sure some of my Republican people don't like fiddling with their votes or democracy. So in number 2, I'm going to go back to those 2 representations of those Democratic leaders. 1 is Andre Carson, 2 is Frank Mervan. If Chris Garten prevails this November, guaranteed in 2027 or 28, they're going to redistrict and take that representation away. Once again, taking the vote away from the people, taking your representation of people who look like me and Andre Carson at Washington, D.C., and they're steadily starting to do that throughout the USA. My voice isn't important as the next person, but I always tell people think about this one seat. Think about this one seat. If we take this man down, we fool Trump's plans, we fool Garten's plans, and we can start focusing on you, the people who are hurting with the affordability issue, who are hurting with Medicaid wait lists, who are trying to make sure that their fire, EMS, and police are funded due to Senate Bill 1 and 24 and Enrolled Act 1 now, because I was just at a meeting for the county council, and they were speaking about the immigration issue, but there were firefighters there. And so with that situation, they said in 2028, we hope that this situation doesn't happen where we don't get a reinvestment back in the counties or the cities, because we might not be able to hire more fire police on the staff. And we're hoping that no one retires either. So when you have firefighters or volunteer firefighters saying, okay, I see what's going on with them. Do I want to step up more because there's not going to be enough there? That's the conversation of what's going on, as well as them fighting for equipment and getting that reimbursed as well and taken care of. Because you don't want a fire truck to break down that's been over 20 years old and then it break down and you not get to your house and your house is burning. And that's real life right there. And these are the conversations I literally just had on Tuesday with volunteer firefighters and actual firefighters in this district.
House burning is an apt metaphor, I think, for what we've got going on. Now you're referring to, the funding cuts that have affected state county and municipal governments, right? That is Senate Bill 1 from 2025. That is the Mike Braun led property tax cuts, which may have saved Hoosier homeowners a couple $100 a year on their property tax bill. Listen, everybody likes to save some money. Of course, home values and valuations have only continued to increase since that point. So I imagine all those savings have probably been wiped out. But what has also been wiped out is huge amount of funding for things like fire departments, schools, especially a lot of 38, I believe, public school districts this November are having to go to their local voters with hat in hand, looking for referendum, to get a local tax increase to make up for what the state has cut. And hopefully a lot of those communities will approve that local tax increase, but I'm sure there will be some that won't. And who suffers? The kids in those school districts. And that is Senate Bill 1 from 2025. That is the signature achievement of the Mike Braun governor's administration. Chris Garten, your opponent, has been a rubber stamp for everything Governor Braun has wanted to do.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing too. Like, you sat here, and I think it's said best. If you're being taxed and you see your tax dollars working hard for you, you're not going to complain, right? We can all agree upon that, but you're not seeing your tax dollars hard at work. And so that's why I think people are upset. Okay, yes, you got a $200 to $300 tax break, but then people found out it was a shell game and it started hitting their communities. And they're like, wait a second. You see the city councils starting to say stuff. You're seeing the county council saying, hey, we've got to be stewards of our money, as well as, your tax dollars. And once again, I'm sitting in there. There was another individual in that county council meeting there's 4 individuals in there who work for the detention center, right? And so they're trying to take care of these individuals and these young adults under 18 who are at the detention center for the youth detention center, and trying to make sure that they can maybe get their life. Some of them can't, but some of them have just made a mistake and trying to get their lives back in order. They're trying to get food services. They're trying to get another employee. They're trying to get some other people paid. There's transportation they got to take care of, between county to county, and they're trying to get funding. And they're saying, the county council says we got to be good stewards of our money, hold on tight, but they're trying to take care of these kids in the detention center. And then I'm asking these questions: how can the state help you take care of this situation? And how are the kids in there? I want to know. I'm asking questions: how is their literacy rate going? How did they come in? Did they come in at a lower level? Did they have disabilities when they came in? And so they were like, yes, it's very high that these young adults or kids who come in here have disabilities or have a low literacy rate. And if the investment into the public schools had been, and they had an assessment and things were done right, maybe they wouldn't be in this situation. So we have this effect that happens to our communities if we don't invest in them correctly. But once again, if you are taxed, you want to see your tax dollars working hard, though.
When people, I think, want to invest in our communities. It's a good investment. It's actually fiscally conservative. It's fiscally responsible to spend that money up front than it is to deal with the consequences of the failure to invest in our communities in the long run. Now, we were talking about the Senate Bill 1 of 2025, the property tax reform, they call it. Senate Bill 2026, or Senate Bill 1 this session, this year, 2026, Mr. Garten was the author of that bill. And that Senate bill sought to perpetuate the waste, fraud, and abuse myth handed down from the White House and slash funding to necessary social services, things like Medicaid, things like SNAP. Now, to my knowledge, that bill and those cuts haven't even kicked in yet and won't until January 1st, 2027. At least at the state level, but we're already seeing Hoosiers being affected by these cuts. Just in this past week, I've seen stories out of Indianapolis news. I've seen it down out of Evansville as well, where Hoosier families, especially that have disabled children, they're getting kicked off of their health insurance through Indiana's Healthy Indiana plan. I don't know if it's oversight, it's mistakes, or what, but Hoosier families are being harmed now.
Yes. And so it's a lot to tackle with the Senate Bill 1 from 2026. Okay. And so I'm going to start with the SNAP. Okay. We already actually saw the effects because the Braun administration put in what you can buy with SNAP and what you can't buy with SNAP. And so right around when that kicked in, I believe October or November of last year, I was in a grocery store, just going to, customer service just to return something and ask where something else was to go get it. And I looked over to the left of my eye and I saw all these groceries just sitting there, more than usual. And I was like, hey, what is all that? And they said, well, that's the groceries that now with the new, the new SNAP and situation where you can only buy certain foods and healthier options, they can't purchase those anymore. And so they had to put them all back. I got text messages from people in the community saying, we are waiting in line because we are heartbroken to see this lady that only got so much in SNAP have to put stuff back. And it was embarrassing for her because it doesn't cover it anymore. So we already saw some of the effects of that. Now, we will agree that we don't want fraud, abuse, and a waste. Yes, but it has to be done the right way. And this is not done the right way because now we have individuals who are in the affordability crisis and they are just trying to get by. They can't get those snaps. And now maybe if they don't do the paperwork or get the information in correctly, they don't get renewed. And so sometimes those notifications don't come in both on the SNAP and the Medicaid situation. And I probably told you this story. There was a person that was doing everything right. I was making phone calls and that person goes, I'm trying to get PT, OT, bills paid and situation. All I'm doing is getting a voicemail and I'm trying to take care of my sister who's severely disabled. I just want you to fix this stuff, Nick. I want you to fix this. The other one was, I just had a conversation with someone at Claysburg this past Saturday. And I said, I always ask people two questions. How can I help and what's going on? He goes, actually, I don't want anybody bothering me. I'm good. But, me and my wife is on Medicaid and she's had a number of strokes. Okay. And I do Medicaid, Medicare, and they're actually doing a good job and stuff like that. And you're hearing that. I was like, well, did you hear about the new qualifications coming? And he's like, what are you talking about? I go, now you have to re-up and hopefully have you gotten a notification because it's coming? He's like, no, but thank you for letting me know. There's some individuals that don't know these notifications are coming. And I also learned with the Black Caucus coming here in Jeffersonville almost 2 months ago, there's some details some people don't know as well. Is now there's a $75 copay charge if you visit an emergency room. So if you're going to emergency room and there's no doctor in your, this is rural as well. There's no doctor in your area. You go to emergency room, you got to pay that $75. Where's this $75 going to come from a person who's trying to make it from week to week? And I was like, I looked at Representative Dan Chester. I said, who put this in here? Like, that's crazy. Like, do people know about this? They're like, no, nobody knows. Nobody knows that this is going to be a $75 charge if you go to the ER, if you got to pay, depending on your insurance, of course. and you got to get hit with that copay, and hopefully your provider will cover that. So these are some of the details are going to start rolling out too.
We talked about how it's more efficient and cheaper to tackle these things upstream. We're already seeing that as they're cutting folks off, as folks are losing their insurance, well, they're putting off necessary routine visits, right? What does that lead to? That leads to compounding medical problems. More people wind up visiting the emergency room, and you've got that copay on top of it, which is going to hit folks there. But these things also leads to longer lines in emergency rooms. You see this in hospitals all across the state where the emergency rooms are packed. It's hard to get in. You got people that are having medical crises that can't get in where they need to because people are having to use the emergency room as their sort of first line of defense if they can't go see a doctor regularly. And who winds up paying for that in the long run is everybody, the taxpayer, or you're paying for it and you increase insurance premiums as the insurance companies try to recoup their outlays from things like these emergency visits. And it is shooting ourselves in the foot.
You don't want to do that. You have to go to the emergency room.
but we're seeing, and I know people who have been kicked off their Medicaid just in the last week. I think since August 1st. There's been this rash of letters that have gone out telling people that they've lost their coverage. Some people don't even know they've lost their coverage until they show up at the doctor or they go to pick up their prescription, and the person behind the counter says, "Hey, there's a problem." Right.
Yeah.
And that is causing direct harm to people right now. Obviously, any lapse in coverage is a problem. God forbid there be some sort of emergency in that period. You have to jump through all these extra hoops to get your coverage back when it shouldn't have been cut off in the first place. And now folks are going to have to go through this whole re-verification process twice as often as part of this new bill in their efforts to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. What it's really doing is rooting out deserving people through paper hurdles.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Once again, I'll go back to that story of the lady that said, "I've done everything right. I've called everybody," and what's going to happen to them? They're going to have more paperwork and more verification, and hopefully they stay on top of it. And I think about that gentleman I just spoke to on Saturday too. Didn't know it was coming, but he did say, "Hey, they've been very helpful, and hopefully they get all the paperwork to me like they've been always doing." And I'm hoping that too. And so, but there's people that don't know, hey, you're going to have a every 3 month re-up. Maybe you'll have it every 6 month re-up. You've got also some work requirements that are coming. Or volunteer hours as well. If you can't work, you'd have to do volunteer hours. So how are you going to get those volunteer hours? And so these are things that are coming, and a lot of people don't understand or know it's coming. And these are individuals who need help up, not a handout. That's the thing too. You talked at the very beginning of this introduction, define the odds. I am a part of a system that worked. The foster care system. Being on, I was probably on Medicaid. I was probably on Passport. I got tuition waivers. I got the education. It worked well. And so how do we replicate this? That's the thing we have to do. We shouldn't punish the people who are doing everything right. We should help out the individuals who are doing everything right and make sure. And of course, there are some bad apples, but it should not ruin the whole bunch for everybody. So we have to be able to prepare. As I always tell people, as well as, I'm a person of faith, people are probably going through a storm right now or heading into one. So how do we get them through the storm together? And that's the real conversation we have to have, because they're going to need to get through this storm. And how do we make it a better form on the other side to make sure that everything is going to be all right? And that's truly is what we have to do as neighbors, as community members, as persons of faith, is to step in that storm with them and get them through and pull them to the other side.
Nick, you mentioned your faith, and I'm not a person of faith, but I am a person who has studied the world's religions, and if I know anything, it was that Jesus told us to feed the hungry, to heal the sick, to clothe the naked, and it is offensive to see the Republican supermajority in Indianapolis, most of whom claim to be God-fearing Christians, going out there and defying the words of Jesus while they proclaim his name, and try to impose their version of the religion on the rest of the state when they don't even follow it themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as I always tell you, and I tell anybody, I'm a person to share my faith. It is not for me to push it upon you. We live in a land that gives us the freedom of religion, and we're supposed to, of course, take care of our neighbor. And so, which is really interesting is about 3 years ago, I get off work, and my neighbor's flagging me down. It's like, help me, help me, help me. And I'm like, what's going on? He's like, well, my mom, she had back surgery. She's in there, fell down. And I'm like, okay, let's go in. So I go in there. She's on the ground. I said, you doing all right? Talking to her. I said, she had a little blood from her back surgery. And I said, all right, we're going to call EMS, and I'm going to stay with you the whole time here. Okay. Until they arrive. Okay. And I did. Okay. And so, they took over and everything like that. So wouldn't you know, like 6 months down the road, 3 months back in April, I'm out talking to her. She's back on her feet. She's doing good after 2.5 years after the surgery. And we're talking to her, and she's like, "Oh, you running again?" I'm like, "Yes, ma'am. Yes, I am." She goes, "Well, I'm a Republican." I go, "All the 7 years that I know here that you're a Republican, I didn't know that." And she goes, "Well, somebody else in my family's running." And I was like, no way. And so come to find out, that person's a Republican, and end up talking to him and saying, did you know I sat with your cousin the other day, 3 years ago when she had her back surgery? He goes, "That was you?" And that's the thing. We are called to take care of our neighbors, and you never know how that line is going to cross. It shouldn't matter about political affiliation. It shouldn't worry about your faith. We're called to take care of our neighbors. And in that moment, my neighbor needed me. And so I went out there, I provided help, and that's what we're supposed to do. And my faith tells me to go help. And so whatever that faith that they have, I'm going to leave that to them. But I know what my faith tells me to do. It's told me to help the stranger, help the the vulnerable, help the hungry, and do what you can to make somebody else's life better, because the foster parents in my life made my life better. And I wouldn't be a father of 2, husband going on 10 years next year, and be able to I get to put my name on the ballot 2 times. Look at that story. If I can do that, anyone can do this in the state of Indiana and America too.
Well, and that goes back to the investing in our people, right? When you were young, the state invested in you, in services that benefited you, and is now reaping the reward. Not just in the services you provide to your community, which are priceless, but if you want to be completely cynical about it, in tax dollars as well. So it pays off, at more than 1-to-1 in the long run. But we talked about, Nick, all these extra hoops that the people have to jump through. The vulnerable Hoosiers that need these public services, right? Extra Medicaid waivers, verifications, all these work requirements, yada yada yada. And the goal is to root out waste, fraud, and abuse, they say. Well, it turns out the fraud doesn't occur at the end user level. Like, to your point, there's maybe like 1 or 2 bad apples, but my God, like it's so much paper. People are not fiddling out a bunch of paperwork to get medical services they don't need in a fraudulent way. Who is committing fraud are the providers, the big hospitals. There's like a $724 million fraud case by a large hospital group in the state of Indiana that was not being pursued by Attorney General Todd Rokita. Why? Well, because those big medical providers, the hospital systems, the medical groups, the physicians groups, folks like that, they are the donors to the Republican Party, to the politicians. They will let their donors commit all kinds of waste, fraud, and abuse, and the end users wind up paying for it.
And this is true. And so why can't we as a state, with the Medicaid issue, I know that they hired a company and there was a shortfall. Why has nobody went back to that company and said, hey, we paid you for services and you actually messed up the numbers. Let's go get the money back from them. That's your tax dollars were being used for that. So we have to really start talking about like, hey, is it going on inside the house or is it going on outside the house? And so a lot of the stuff that's going outside the house is shining more than what's going on inside the house. So let me say that. So I will have to actually look into the instance you talked about there. But I do know that, hey, a lot of these things can be prevented if we are auditing and making people accountable and checking the records and making sure those tax dollars are being used correctly in the correct manner.
So much of it's about priorities, right, Nick? And we value the Indiana Republicans, the supermajority that has been in charge for 20 years in our state now, as we've continued to fall in healthcare rankings and education rankings and air and water quality. We're near the bottom, but we're always ranked near the top in terms of being a business friendly state. And listen, not to crap on business, listen, I'm a fan of, small business and folks going out there and the American dream and entrepreneurship and all that. But it's not the small guys that are benefiting from the supermajority. It's the big guys. It's the big businesses. It's the folks that get these giant contracts. The IEDC is a total slush fund. So we, have put our priority on, I think, like lowering business taxes, lowering regulations, and making it easier for folks to profit in this state on the backs of everyday working folks.
Yeah, so I want to mention two things there in regards to small businesses as well as businesses. I think the big story came out before the Pro Tem as well as Garten going for a speaker is that all people of color, all businesses of color and women are not going to be able to get government contracts so easily. And they want to make it an equal playing field. And so you start to think, okay, who's going to get those contracts? Is it going to be, hey, wink, wink, nod, nod, or shake a hand? This is where this is going to happen. Is it going to be like the reflecting pool? Hey, come fix my pool. Uh-huh. And then, so you start to really think like, who's being disenfranchised at this point? And so I think that's a real conversation to start to have is who's going to get a fair shake at everything. And so that's the first one I have to kind of talk about is like, hey, I have some things to learn on this, but that does not seem right. Okay. That does not seem right. And we keep doing the same thing over, but it's not, it's almost trickling down. It'll trickle down to the lower people. We'll invest in the business. It'll trickle down to the lower people. But I think now the people are starting to resonate because how Indiana became data center happy. And so that was what that meeting was about. And one of the best quotes is now people are starting to pay attention. We had a big issue out in Charlestown with the new data center coming in. And so there's been a moratorium almost every city and also about to go in the county. But the best quote that came out of that meeting for the data center and for some other things, she said, this lady was at the podium speaking to him. She goes, I am only one person speaking to you right now. There are 40 people in this room, but you know what? There's 160 outside this room I talked to. 160 people I talk to, I get on the phone and tell them what's going on in this meeting and what's going on in their city and their county. And then they tell people. And so I want to let you know, like that Charlestown meeting, over 100 people showed up for that data center situation. And people are sitting there saying, hang on, what's going on? And I applaud Mayor Treva Hodges for the work she did and try to fight as much as she could in regards to that. But we were in the back telling the people, this is not her fault. This is not the what's the name commissioners who have to vote on this fault. This is a state issue because we made it open season for data centers. And now there's between 30 to, I believe, 35 to 40 data centers in the state of Indiana. And they're getting all these tax incentives. Some of them are, some of them are not. But you've got this, people are starting to pay attention because they're starting to be built in their backyards. And so, yes, we are pro-business, state, and we're welcoming. But also, does it come to the expense of the everyday Hoosier? That's the real question that people are starting to realize in what's going on now.
You mentioned the business contract provision that Governor Mike Braun canceled. That I don't want to say preferential treatment. It basically made the state pause and make sure they were looking at minority and women-based businesses or women-owned businesses for state contracts before they went and handed them out. Oftentimes, and I want to debunk the myth that they're like, giving out contracts to people that are unqualified. It was basically, hey, did you make sure you looked at everybody and not just at your good old boys, not just at your political donors to give the contract to whoever, your pool guy that who's going to do a crappy job, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the it's about saving Hoosier taxpayers money. Hey, listen, it turns out maybe there actually is somebody who you weren't looking at first who can do the job just as well or better for less. And to the point of these data centers, Nick, that it's sort of the same thing. We are throwing the farm. We're giving away the farm to these big firms, these big donors. These are the kind of folks who give to our elected officials, who donate to their campaigns and reap the rewards once their preferred folks are in office. We saw in 2019, I believe it was under Governor Holcomb, who signed this data center law that to entice these businesses to come to Indiana and set up shop here with all these tax abatements. And so, they're listen, they bring some jobs up front during construction, maybe. But then once the thing's up, it employs like a night watchman and a Roomba. Like, people don't work in these data centers. What they do is they drive up everybody's electricity rates because of the sheer amount of demand of electricity they consume. It makes the utilities have to add more to the grid, and who winds up paying for that? The ratepayers, the end users. The water issue, even the ones that, and I advocated for, maybe if they use a closed loop system, they don't use as much water. It turns out these closed loop systems aren't exactly closed. It's just sort of a branding that they use. They still have to refill them and flush them occasionally, and that winds up taking up water, and it could put like forever chemicals into the water stream. And our water quality in our state's already not great, and then the noise pollution, the light pollution that comes with these things, and for all of that, like, maybe we could live with some of those things if they were sort of away from our neighborhoods and they used renewable energy sources, and they were responsible with their water. Maybe we could live with those things if they paid their damn taxes, but they're not even paying their taxes. They're getting these abatements. So, like, what do Hoosiers even get from these things?
Yes. And that's the thing. The one in Charlestown was a mid-scale. Okay. And so what happened was, at the end of that meeting, they were able to put up a lot of provisions in. Okay. Which will hold them accountable, and it will possibly delay them getting there until all these studies are done. A berm is put in, the making sure they don't expand on it as well. And so if these things were put in at first at the state level, and to make sure that they were, held accountable. Because what happens after 5 to 10 years and they pack up and leave? Do they have to put the land back at like it was? Do they make sure they pay their fair share, that there's no burden to that city, or they make sure that they are investing? That was what's in the data center things too. They were talking about is like, hey, what are the investments going to get? Because there was a story that came out that, hey, there was investments by one data center that was recently put out, and they were investing back in the community, the school, and stuff like that. But there has been no discussions, because a lot of these NDAs are signed, a lot of questions are not answered, and that's making the public uncertain. And you don't want an uncertain public, okay? And so when they start asking questions, it's best to give the answer you can, and we have to make sure they're held accountable. And at the state level, we can put in some of these laws to make sure that if they do leave, it's not a burden. The water, the electricity, and the environment is not at the burden of the everyday Hoosier to take care of. It should be with them, who are on the land and using that power, water, and the land at all times. So this is a real conversation that is happening. It has hit us at Clark County. It has hit Floyd County too. And people are starting to have these discussions like, okay, what are the long-term impacts? How do we deal with this now? And do I want that in my backyard too? Is happening right now too.
You see it across the state. Down in your area, multiple data centers affecting multiple neighborhoods in Indianapolis. I know there's one Monrovia that the folks there are fighting. You see the Leap District in Lebanon. The folks who live near there are throwing a fit because the ground is rumbling from all the heavy equipment. They got the floodlights on 24 hours a day, and everything else, and affecting the water from Eagle Creek. They're drawing from Indianapolis, want to pipe it up there to Lebanon. My hometown, Michigan City, they got a data center went in. People don't want that. Near there in New Prairie, they've got like a massive Amazon data center that just went in. Hobart, I think, all over the state, all across the state, they're coming here because our Republican supermajority government invited them in and said, we're open for business, right? Mm-hmm. And you can do whatever you want, basically, as long as you bring some short-term jobs. But what you're seeing, and what I'm hearing from all of these communities, is that this issue cuts across partisan lines. Republicans, Democrats, whoever, nobody wants these.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. I'm sitting here and I'm at the Charlestown meeting because here's how I got involved. I thought it was like, hey, that's not happening. And then a family member reached out to me and said, hey, this is going to be built in my neighborhood. Nick, you're politically savvy. What can you do about this? And I got on it. Okay. And so I started reaching out to the people. And then I coordinated with Mayor Trevor Hodges. Of those people, I said, the best thing to do is to go speak with her so you get the facts and information. But what you need to do is you need to organize and understand what exactly is happening to your community. And so that's what you do. You start to get involved in. I didn't ask about political affiliation, but I could tell that it was different people in the room that saying, wait a second here, we're a community. We didn't get to put the input on it until the meeting was called and then canceled and called upon. And so when those 150 people showed up, they were past party lines. They said, no, this is something as a community we need to stand up about. And so that's what's happening. Is the situation is now coming to people's backyards and doorsteps. And so now they have to figure out how to do it, and it's working its way up the government line. And so it got heated at that meeting. At 3 times, I thought that meeting was going to get canceled, but they were able to push through. They had to vote for the situation because it was 4-3. But I think people are now paying attention what exactly is going on, because it's being built in their backyards and the problems coming to their doorstep.
When it's your air, when it's your water, when
Mhm.
it's your land, when it's your schools, when it's your neighbor, talking of when you sat with that woman who was having a medical emergency, like you didn't check her political registration before
No.
you helped her. That's your neighbor. When we gather together to push back against these harmful construction projects in our neighborhood, it's not about
Yeah.
Republican or Democrat. We check our political registration at the door there because it's about our neighbors and helping our neighbors.
Mhm.
And that's how we should treat things like Medicaid and like SNAP. It's about our neighbors' health care, our neighbors' access to medical care, our neighbors' access to food, our neighbors' children's access to food, and that those things shouldn't be political. But
Mhm.
in the end, Nick, the way our system of government is these things are political. So um, we're going to have to change the way things are done in Indianapolis, and that means changing the personnel in
Yeah.
Indianapolis for sure. So, like, how are we going to do this? I mean, there are a select number of state house districts that I know are getting help from outside from national groups trying to flip the Indiana state legislature. Not flip necessarily. Again, that is an uphill battle. Our lines are very gerrymandered, but to break the supermajority, to slow them down, to put roadblocks in their place. The Senate, even bigger uphill battle. But I think your race is a particular hinge point in changing the dynamic of government in Indianapolis, because they're rudderless if their next guy, their chosen next guy, loses. And you, I think, are well poised to do that, because I see the way, I hear the way that you are involved in your community, and your community loves you. They come to you across party lines. So what are Indiana Democrats going to do after November, after the new session begins in 2027, to sort of change the dynamic there in Indianapolis?
So one, got to win. We got to win to change the dynamics of things. And like you said, if we take down this one seat, it puts a stop to Trump. It puts a stop to redistricting, and we can start delivering for you. Okay. And so what I do out there is I just go to work. I don't complain. I don't moan. I just go to work. I'm looking at my table right now, and I have over 500 postcards. We have already sent out 1,400 postcards in less than a week. And I am very thankful and humbled by the overall approach that people have. Like, I want to send out these postcards. And what I've been telling people, now is the time. All right. All right. And now is the time that we put we fully fund universal PK. We make sure that we fully fund public education. We make sure that Medicaid waitlist gets reduced. We make sure that the fire, EMS, and police get the funding they need so they can show up to your door in an emergency. What better time than now to start that change? And I think the people are starting to realize that, because the supermajority has been in charge for too long. And now you already see them, as of last week, already start talking about what they're going to do in the future. They're not talking about what they're going to do for you right now. And that's a situation we need to truly start talking about. I'm showing up to these. I've been to the county council meeting twice this week. All right. County government building twice this week, to sit and listen and hear what the people are going through, from detention, the youth detention center, to immigration, to the data center. I sat in that meeting, and there was a gentleman. I walked in the room the second time in a week, and he shook my hand. He goes, "You are everywhere. You are everywhere. And I really appreciate you coming and listening to this. And I know you're running for office." But that's the thing too. You want someone who's going to be there in the good times and the bad times, tell you the truth, and who's going to fight for you. And that's me. And so I'm going to show up to these meetings. I'm going to send out these postcards. I'm going to connect with individuals. And I'm going to go door to door. I had the cops called on me because I was going to door. So, but I'm going to go door to door. I'm going to go to door to door. I'm going to go put these postcards in. I'm going to phone call people because that's what it takes. That human connection and showing up for your community and making sure that someone's going to be able to fight for you. And like I said, what better now than now is to break up the supermajority and finally start working for you, the everyday Hoosier.
Well, Nick, if folks in your area or any part of the state or anywhere in the country, we've got folks that listen all over the place. Unusual pockets of support out in the Pacific Northwest. Who knew? But if folks are listening and they want to help you out, where can they go? How can they connect with you online? What's your website? What's that Act Blue? How can folks donate, volunteer, all of that good stuff?
Yeah, so you're going to go to HoosiersForNickMarshall.com. There is a donate button. There is a volunteer button. And also you can find me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, as well as X. You can find me there and spread this message of now is the time that we start standing up for everyday Hoosiers like you. We stop these redistricting efforts right now, and we make sure that we take care of you. I'm not worried about the future. I'm worried about what's going on right now with you. Things are hitting your pocket. You can't get the health care you want. You're afraid that fire trucks might break down because they're so old. So we need to invest back into you, the everyday Hoosiers. I know I'm saying that a lot. I'm going to keep saying that, and I'm going to keep showing up until I get told not to anymore. And I'll probably show up again.
All right. Well, fantastic. So, Nick, listen, I'm going to send you backstage while I say goodbye to the folks. Hang tight so I can thank you and say goodbye off mic. But for now, Nick Marshall, thank you so much for joining me here tonight on the Who's Left podcast.
Thank you.
All right, folks, that was Nick Marshall, candidate for State Senate District 45 down there in the southern part of the state. If you missed any part of the live stream, it'll be available immediately on Facebook and YouTube. Full show notes, transcripts, and the links first thing in the morning at progressiveindiana.net. You can find all of my work there, as well as that of other left-leaning Hoosier voices. We can't do it without your support, so please consider contributing to Who's Left and the wider network with a paid subscription if you're able. This independent media project relies solely on the generosity of kind patrons like you to make this information available for free to everybody. Please follow the Progressive Indiana Network at our full spelled out name on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at the same handle, and over on Blue Sky and TikTok, find us at PIN Indiana. Sunday morning, I will be live at 10:30 a.m. Eastern for Who's Left This Week, Indiana's only unapologetically progressive Sunday morning politics show. The Democratic nominee for me and Nick's 9th District, Brad Meyer, will be a panelist on this week's episode, along with progressive organizer and medical doctor Megan Alderman. We'll discuss the week's top Indiana stories, plus U.S. and international news through a Hoosier lens. Tune in on Progressive Indiana Network's YouTube, Facebook Live, or Substack pages. Thanks for joining us. Connect with me online on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at who'sleft.us, or on Facebook, TikTok, or YouTube at Who's Left. Progressive Indiana Network's handle, like I said, is the full spelled out name on most sites. Please help us grow with a follow wherever you're at. Send me a direct message anywhere with feedback, tips, ideas, and concerns, or email me at scott@who'sleft.us. Finally, please forward the show to a friend and have them pass it on too. Let's keep building this project and a truly democratic state, one conversation at a time. Until the next one, this has been a special presentation of the Who's Left podcast. I'm Scott Aaron Rogers. Love each other, Indiana.